There have been times I was there when he tortured him. You know, they was hollering, start crying, and he thought it was fun. He laughed, gave me that little funny grin. He just having fun. I didn't see that in him, but I knew that he was torturing. I had to ask God to forgive me for what I did, you know, but I knew for a fact I didn't kill him.
Today's video is one that was requested by a lot of y'all, okay? A lot of y'all. This name has been in my comment section so much, and I have refrained from doing the story because he just makes my ass itch. Before we get started today, no, this ain't no sponsorship, girl. What would I look like sitting here trying to sell y'all a baby Doppler? So this is the thing. This is a baby Doppler. It's like a handheld, you can listen to your baby's heartbeat through this little thing anytime you want. You know, you just put the little jelly on your stomach and hold the little thing there and it plays the heartbeat. I had bought this for somebody, and unfortunately before it was time for me to gift it to them, they lost their baby. I noticed in the Tika survivor story comment section, it was a lot of y'all commenting that y'all are expecting mothers. If you are an expectant mother out there in these streets and you are interested, if you want it free of charge, I will sanitize the box because you know we got the COVID going on. It has never been opened. If you're bored at the house and you want to lay up and listen to your little baby heart beating, child, send me an email. I'll put the email address on the screen. The first person, I guess, that I get the email from, I will gladly send it to you. I hit the outside of the box with a little Lysol wipe. You ain't got to worry about the cooties or the coronas crawling all over the box. Make sure you also leave, of course, your address where you want me to ship it to. And yeah, that's just it. And you just gotta name your baby after me. That's it. Like if it's a girl, you know, Brittney is the vibe. If it's a boy, you know what? I met a boy named Brittney. He wasn't a boy, he was a grown man. Looked like a big old strong football player, honestly. And his name was Brittney. It was the craziest thing ever. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. So this is what happened real quick. I'm at work and I took a late lunch. Me and like the other girls that sat in the cubicles around me, we took a late lunch. When we got to the break room area, this is in 2008. So they still had a payphone. Look at the young ones like, what's a payphone? They still had a payphone inside the break room, which is crazy because I feel like in 2008, that's still kind of, I don't know. Nevertheless, me and the girls get to the break room. We put in all our little quarters, nickels, and dimes into the machines to get our snacks, right? We sitting down, partaking in our lunch, and then this guy comes into the break room, minding his own business. Now, this was the night shift. We get up to leave. We go to pull on the little door, baby, and it is very much locked. So we like, okay, no worries, they locked this door. We go and check all four. All of them locked. We shaking it. Literally, nobody is around. Nobody is hearing anything. None of us had our cell phones. So we like, you know what? We do got the payphone. Problem is, baby, the payphone don't take pennies. So we didn't use all of our good old coins down to the machine. I'm like, this is really a nightmare. So we're really just banging on the doors. So some time goes by. We really in there just chilling at this point, waiting on somebody to just so happen to come past the door and release us. One of my coworkers calls my name out. Of course I respond because I'm thinking I'm the only Brittney. And then he looks too and I was like, oh no, she said Brittney. He was like, I know, that's my name. And I said, you're a liar. This man shows me his badge and it's spelled B-R-I-T-T-A-N-Y. I said, oh. And he didn't look like a Brittney, not even a boy Brittney. He looked like, it's a wrestler that looks like, he looked like Mark Henry. He was very much giving Mark Henry. High key. That has become the eighth wonder of the world in my mind because I'm just like, why would your mother name you? Maybe that's the thing and I'm just ignorant to it. But I haven't since met a man named Brittney, but it's at least one of them out there. If he ever sees this video, no shade. Alright, I didn't talk enough. Let's get into the video. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. There's not a lot of information about his childhood online. And so we don't know much of what his home life is about, but we do know that he was born on August 30th of 1952, making him a Virgo. And so that obviously has a lot to do with this. Yes, Virgos, today is your day. Lonnie grew up in South Central LA, and after high school, he joins the Army as a cook, but he ends up getting discharged in 1975 because a year prior to that, in April of 1974, he is stationed over in Germany, and a group of him and his army buddies are hanging out. They're, taking drinks, doing all of the things, just having themselves a merry old time. Now, apparently all three of them had this real little trifling spirit on them because they decide to leave the bar, get into the car. They see this woman as they're going down the street and decide that they're going to try to kidnap her. This woman was not trying to go down without a fight. So she begins kicking, she's screaming, she's yelling. Her screaming was just bringing on too much attention for them to be successful in their little abduction. So they decide to abort the mission and go on and leave her there. Unfortunately, though, this failed attempt does not deter them from their determination of kidnapping someone that night. And so they pretty much just move on to the next person that presents the opportunity. They spot a 17-year-old girl by the name of Ingrid. She's standing at a train station by herself, just waiting on the next pickup when the guys pull up alongside her. One of the men jumps out of the car, holds a blade to her neck, and forces her into the vehicle. They then drive off to a secluded field where each of the men take turns violating her like for hours. And as if that is not bad enough, Lonnie then takes out a camera and takes pictures of the girl after the fact. The three men then drop her off and they go on about their business like nothing had happened. The next morning, Ingrid goes down to the police station to report the incident. It takes a little time, but ultimately they are able to identify the three men and also charge them for their horrific actions. When they go to court, as the woman is giving her account of the incident and the night, Lonnie can't even look at this woman. Like, he has his head down. He's looking over at the wall, child. He should have been ashamed of himself, but I don't think that's what it was. When it was time for the men to speak for themselves, they all got up there trying to convince the German court that the night did happen, but it was in fact all consensual, and she was pretty much just lying. Their defense teams tried to push this narrative and this angle as the true version of events in order to support this claim. They pointed out the fact that she had minimal defense wounds. Other than a few cuts on her abdomen, she really had no other injuries. And her reasoning for this was that she was afraid to fight back. She didn't know what they were going to do, what they were capable of. And so she just didn't fight them too much in an effort to save her life potentially. So that was the reason for that. Fortunately, all three men are found guilty and they are convicted. Lonnie is only sentenced to 3 years, 4 months in prison. And as a result of his guilty verdict, he also was discharged from the army. So they pretty much kicked that girl out. He also got off kind of easy. They were very lenient with him. Because of his mild-mannered demeanor, they felt like he was not the mastermind behind the whole thing. In fact, they stated that he would likely not have done anything like this or been involved if he wasn't pressured to do so by the other two guys. It was the opinion of the court that Lonnie was less likely to reoffend and was not all that dangerous on his own. He was just, too nice of a guy, which seems to be the theme of opinions for just about everybody who knew Lonnie. After being discharged, Lonnie returns to his neighborhood in South Central, and people really liked him. He was both well liked and well known. Lonnie was that guy that you called on when you needed anything. Like, he literally could help out with anything that you needed. If you needed your car fixed, he was a shade tree mechanic. If you needed a deal on something, you go to him and you tell him what you want, give him a couple of days. He lets you know when you can pick up and what the cost will be. And nobody ever asked questions about how he got it, y'all. And of course, he never told. That's how little Lonnie operated, and that's what he was known for, honey. That's how he got down. Baby, don't ask no questions. Do you want this microwave for $20 or not? He was also the neighborhood loan shark. Anytime somebody needed to borrow some money, he was more than happy to help them out. Lonnie lands a job as a trash collector for the LA Department of Sanitation, and he also meets and marries a young woman. The tea is with his first wife. Allegedly, she got strung out because it is the 80s and it is South Central, and so if you know, you know. I really only know because I watch No Fall, so there's that. They were very much given Wanda and Leon, if you watch the show. Her habit became a lot. He would give her money from, his paycheck in order for her to pay the bills. The problem is she was taking the money and going and buying her little drug of choice. She was not paying the bills. So he was coming home and the lights were off and he was very much upset about it. But he really loved her and he wanted to make it work. It really bothered him seeing her like that, and it was a lot for him to deal with at that time. Y'all see how Leon be tore up over wanting to steal? To this day. This first wife really takes him down through there for a while before their marriage is dissolved. And this reportedly left a very, very sour taste in his mouth in regard to anybody who drank or smoked or did anything like that. He really he didn't want anybody around him that drank, not even beer, not even alcohol. He didn't want any of it around him. He was very vocal about his disdain for anybody who partakes in any of the things. He also develops this very strong disdain for women involved in the sex work business, child, which tells me his wife was out there selling about a pound. Why else would you be mad? Like, literally nothing else makes sense to me in my mind. Now, about mid-80s, the LAPD, they became aware that there was an apparent serial killer on the loose who was targeting Black women. All of the women were either involved in sex work or they had addictions or a combination of the two. They give the person that they're looking for the nickname Southside Slayer. During this time, the public image of a serial killer is a white man who goes out targeting predominantly white women. So this is the image that they have in their mind for the person that they're looking for. They just thought maybe he just got a different palette than the others, but he certainly in their mind was a young to middle-aged white man. And y'all, let me tell you how trifling the LAPD is or was at this time. They used the code NHI during this time. I'm not sure if this is still a thing, but I know while this was going down, a lot of the cases had the code NHI on them, which is the acronym for no humans involved. And so they would use this code on cases if the victim was somebody of color or someone involved in sex work or had like an addiction. They would put this code on the case and put that case on the back burner. Police also failed to warn the public that Black women in the South Central area are pretty much being hunted and they should watch out. As these women were being found, they didn't even get media coverage. Like, the news of what was going on around town was pretty much just spreading via word of mouth. None of these crimes made it into the LA Times or even the local news for that matter. It also did not help that Richard Ramirez was out there running amok during this time. Richard Ramirez was out there wreaking havoc. He was specifically targeting like upscale white women who had money or influence to some degree. And all of that was all over the news. All over the LA Times, all over the little local newspapers, just everywhere. The very obvious indifference to the crimes committed against the women who were poor or women of color who had addictions or involved in sex work, this really added a lot of tension to the already tense and fragile relationship between the LAPD and like the minority neighborhoods. They just felt like it was very much blatant disrespect and disregard for their lives. They did not appreciate being treated as though their lives did not matter because they did not come from the same place, share the same skin tone, or have the material things that these women that Richard Ramirez was targeting that they had. As a result of this, the group called the Black Coalition Fighting Black Serial Murderers, they form and decide that they're going to take matters into their own hands as far as like warning the people, spreading awareness, actually trying to find out who this is. They wanted to make sure that every woman that fit the description of the type of women that were being targeted, that they were made aware that this was going on and that they needed to be safe. They also put together a fund so they could offer an award for anybody who could come forward with information regarding the case leading to an arrest. They were very committed to finding out who this person was and getting them off the streets. They were out there on the streets handing out flyers. Most of their groundwork was done in the South Central area, but honey, they little flyers was making it all the way up into the Beverly Hills. When the LAPD caught wind of this group, they didn't really like the fact that this little ragtag bunch of misfits from the hoods of South Central had come together and were really making them look bad. They were out here doing more than the LAPD had done, so they didn't like that too much. And of course, the group was very vocal in pointing out the fact that, you know, they weren't receiving any media coverage and that nothing was really being investigated. At this point, the LAPD, they officially launched an investigation finally to look into what was happening. Little did they know, though, their assailant was not a white man, child. Not at all. There was no white man targeting Black women, but Gary Heidnick was out there in them streets heavy, so that's not entirely true. But in this particular case, they were looking for actually a black man targeting black women. And not just any old black man. A black man that had worked as a shade tree mechanic, not just in his neighborhood, but actually down to the precinct on 77th Street. Yes, this man was hired several times to go down to the police station and work on the squad cars. Sometimes their personal vehicles, because they knew he was somewhat a mechanic with reasonable prices. And he was no stranger to the local police. He'd actually been arrested several times for possession of stolen goods, other little theft charges. I know he was the neighborhood booster. So he had gotten caught up a couple of times with that, but they had no idea or clue or inkling that this man was behind any of the killings. And little Lonnie had been quite a busy boy. He claimed his first victim in August of 1985 down in South LA. Deborah Jackson, she was a 29-year-old cocktail waitress who he abducted while she was on her way home from a friend's house. August 10th, she is found and she has suffered 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. This was Lonnie somewhat testing the waters. After he did this, he decided he wanted to lay low and see if he was going to actually get away with it. So for an entire year, nothing else happened. He actually decides to go on and give love another try. He meets a woman by the name of Sylvia. Within a year, the two are married and they go on to have a total of 2 children. They have a son and a daughter. Their relationship was pretty rocky, off and on. She would leave for like months at a time. She ultimately ends up just leaving him for good altogether. Lonnie was also a pretty decent father. He was no stranger to any of the locals. Everybody within the neighborhood knew him. He was very social. He would oftentimes spend time outside of his house, standing under the garage, talking to the other little middle-aged men in the neighborhood. He appeared to be so average and so normal. He's talking to the neighbors, you know, kind of getting a feel for what they thought, bringing up the subject and chatting about it. After months go by and child don't even make the newspaper. People are really not even talking about it as much. There doesn't appear to be any kind of open, active investigation where they're trying to find the assailant. He starts to feel comfortable. Like, you know what? Maybe I can do this again and get away with it. And so he decides to go after victim number 2. Almost an exact year to the date that Deborah was found, August 12th of 1986. Henrietta Wright is found discarded just a couple of miles down from where they found Deborah. The crime itself, it was very similar to the one committed against Deborah, so they knew that most likely they were looking for the same guy. The only difference with this one is the fact that he actually sexually assaulted this victim, and he had not done that with the previous one. 2 days after this, right when the police are noticing a pattern here, establishing an MO, victim number 3 is found, and it completely throws them off. The pattern is broken and they're confused. The thing is, in the mid to late 80s, there were a number of serial killers who were all active within the California area. I don't know what was in the water in California during this time. I don't know what y'all had going on, but it really was a lot of them. And most of them were preying on women. Many of them have said in interviews after the fact that they felt like during this time it was very easy to pick up a stranger. Like, it literally took no effort to convince a stranger to either go home with you or get into your car. So they felt like it was just a free-for-all hunting ground there. Like, the victim pool was just plentiful. It was just way too easy for them to pick somebody up and do what they wanted to do. On average, between 1985 and 1989, there were 800 homicides per year. That is a whole lot. It wasn't until like news started to spread about what was going on and people becoming fearful and just a lot more conscious of their actions and the situations that they could possibly be putting themselves in harm's way. And also, with all of this going on and a lot of them, the majority of them targeting the same type of person, it made it damn near impossible for them to determine what victim belonged to who. So they were very, very dependent on MOs. They were having a rather difficult time determining whose victim was whose. However, the case of the Grim Sleeper, it was slightly different than everybody else. Most people were discarding their victims alongside highways and in random fields, like in the open. He was hiding his after the fact. He would take them to dark alleys that were not frequented. He often used dumpsters as a dumping site, and even still, he wouldn't just leave them out in the open. He would cover them up with like dirty carpet, mattresses sometimes. He would always make sure that they were not in plain sight. And of course, when determining whether or not these were his works, I mean, it was the fact that all of his victims were black and most of the people were targeting the white girls. His victims were also typically female. So when they find this man, this really throws them off. 36-year-old Thomas Steele, he was allegedly a pimp from San Diego visiting South Central. He had been found right in the middle of an intersection. And so this also did not fit the pattern because typically everybody else was hidden. And granted, nothing about this mimics or resembles his other works. Police are still determined that the same guy is responsible for this guy, which I don't think that they believe that. I think they just didn't feel like doing the work, and so they were just like, you know what? He struck again. This time it's a guy. It's like, no, sis. Somebody got into an argument that went bad in the middle of the street. Roughly 5 months or so later, in January of 1987, 23-year-old Barbara Ware, she is found in similar circumstances as the first two women. And police know for sure who is behind this one, like without a shadow of a doubt. Alright, so I didn't like the direction that the under eye was heading, so I had to Control-Alt-Delete that girl. We're gonna pretend like it never happened, okay? Police find Barbara Ware and 3 months go by. They're still no closer to finding out who was responsible than they were on day one, okay? And nobody was really talking about it. And by this time, Lonnie is really feeling himself because he is down there working at the police station on these cars. Like, he literally is hiding in plain sight. And they don't suspect a thing. No one suspects a thing. Even after comments that he had made to people in the neighborhood about how it was really him and he was cleaning up the streets, they still just laughed it off and was just like, hey, you so crazy. Like, they did not take him as serious. So, of course, he continues to do what he's doing. He goes on to his next victim, which is a 26-year-old woman by the name of Bernita Sparks. He had actually spotted Bernita walking down the street on her way to the store to buy her some cigarettes and minding her business. He abducts this woman and then he discards her in a dumpster after the fact. And this attack was particularly brutal because he had not really caused like much physical harm to these women. But this woman in particular suffered a brutal attack. He next targets a 26-year-old woman by the name of Mary Lowe. Mary was down at the bar on Halloween night celebrating with her friends, just having a good time. At some point toward the end of the night, when she is on her way home, she is picked up by Lonnie, who either forced her into the vehicle or offered her a ride. And she accepted and then got into the vehicle. Don't know which one was the case. And the very next day, she is found in an alley, the same alley that he had dumped his previous victim in. This particular case is a pivotal moment for investigators because there's a witness who had seen her getting into a red-orange 1979 Ford Pinto, one with a white racing stripe on the hood. Not only that, the witness was also able to provide a description of the assailant, which was that he was male, he was young, and he was black. And the investigators was like, what? Black? Like, are you sure he wasn't just tan, sis? Are you sure? We've been looking for a white guy all along. Honey, they were perplexed at the news. But still, even with that information, they weren't any closer to finding out exactly who the guy was, and women were still popping up all over the city under the same condition. 3 years into his spree, on November 20th, 1988, mother was just 8 days old. A young woman by the name of Anitria, she is headed to a friend's house to a party. She's dressed up, ready to go have a good time. She is walking down the street, headed to her destination, when suddenly a well-dressed man in a car pulls up alongside her and offers her a ride the rest of the way. She politely declines the offer. She's like, no thank you. Then he makes this strange comment. His response to her declining his offer for a ride is that black women think too highly of themselves. And she is like, wait, like, I just don't want to ride. So she's feeling like it's not like that, and at this point, she decides to just go ahead and take the ride. She didn't want him to feel like it was like that. Baby, do you know I would not have cared what he felt like? Or baby, you would have just had to pull off with your attitude, because I would have politely treated you like a fixture on the wall, child. Fire hydrant on the street. I would not have paid him no more mind. However, this story ain't about me. Her first impression when she gets into the car is, okay, this is nice. Like, the inside was really clean, immaculate. It was beautiful, well kept. It was a very nice car. She decides to compliment him on his car just to give like an icebreaker because he really wasn't talking and she just felt like it was a little awkward. So she compliments him on the car. She's making comments about how obviously well maintained the car is, whatever else you say to a man with a nice car. From that point, a little conversation starts up. They're going back and forth and the conversation is kind of steady, but she noticed that even with him talking, it's still awkward. Like, something is still very much off with this man, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She's like, it's just weird. She's like, I don't know if he's just awkward or if I'm just uncomfortable, but for whatever reason, sis was uncomfortable. And he struck her as a little bit odd. They began to talk about the party and she just being nice. And because he was already well dressed, she decides to offer him to join her at the party. She felt like that was the courteous thing to do as he was giving her a ride to the party. She's like, you know, you want to come inside for a second, get you some meatballs and rotel, you can. But honey, all of her courteousness and her niceness kind of went out the window when he started making these stops, these random stops and talking to people. And she's like, I got somewhere to be. Like, you're about to make me miss the whole party. Finally, after he makes a stop and spends just too much time talking to whoever he stopped to talk to, he gets back into the car and she says something to him about it. She hears him say something, but she doesn't quite hear what he said. And when she asks him to repeat himself, he goes, bitch, I'll shoot you again. And she like, again? I've been shot? As soon as she realized she had been shot, sis passes out, blacks out completely. Anitra wakes up to a flash in her eyes, like a camera flash. And when she opens her eyes, she realizes that this man is now straddled on top of her and is taking pictures of her. He gets off and then he begins to drive and she is just begging him, like, let me go. I won't go to the police. I won't tell anybody about it. Like, just drop me off at the hospital, pull off. I won't tell them a thing. He does not listen. Instead, he is driving and opens her door and throws her out, like pushes her out of the moving vehicle, obviously expecting her not to make it. But miraculously, this woman gets up, walks a couple of blocks to a friend's house. When she gets there, of course, the friend rushes her to the emergency room. She then goes to the police with a full description of the man who had attacked her. She described him as looking very neat, very tidy. She said that he was very much like geeky. He wore a black polo shirt that was tucked into his little khakis. When I tell you she gave a full description, sis gave a full and detailed description for sure. Not only does she provide them with a detailed description of the man himself, she also gives a very detailed description of the car. A beautiful red-orange 1979 Pinto with a white racing stripe painted across the top. Police run a ballistics test against the bullet that was retrieved from her chest, and they find that it matches several of the victims from the Southside Slayer. And so they know that this for sure is their guy. After he heard news that this woman was attacked and that she had lived, he decided to lay low. He was like, you know what? Let me not. He decided that he was just gonna lay low and live life just as normally as you and I, at least until things kind of simmer down. When talking to Anitra, they actually put together a composite sketch and they made mention of it, but they never show it to the public. Like, they literally just made it and stashed it away in a drawer somewhere. What was the reason? Over these 14 years, though, it does not leave his mind. He still wants to be out there. And all of a sudden, his thirst for child sinister behavior, it just becomes too much to bear. Sis had held out for as long as he felt like he could. And it was time for him to get out there. And so he decides to strike again. This time, he targets a 15-year-old runaway by the name of Princess. Princess had run away from home and she had been reported missing by her family on December 21st of 2001, and they had not seen or heard from her since. Unfortunately, though, she had turned to sex work as a means of like earning money to provide for herself. Police instantly knew that this was the work of their Southside Slayer that they were pursuing 14 years before. And at this point, they decided to just change his name from that to the Grim Sleeper because of the amount of time in between the crimes. She gets some media coverage, and they of course refer to him as the Grim Sleeper. And he, I guess, I don't know if he liked it and decided he was going to adhere to his name and move accordingly, but he goes dormant again for a whole solid year. But then of course he decides to strike again, this time targeting a 36-year-old woman by the name of Valerie. 4 years after Valerie, in January of 2007, 25-year-old Janicia Peters is found, and the DNA extracted from this crime scene came back as a match for DNA found on previous victims of the Grim Sleeper. Police knew that if this one particular little set of DNA was found on multiple victims and it did not match any of them, it had to be the DNA of their guy. By this time, DNA testing and the forensic science, it had progressed a lot further than where it was in the 80s. Furthermore, since 2005, they have been requiring everybody who had received like felony charges, especially weapons charges, to submit a sample of DNA. So they're really feeling confident. They're like, you know what? The guy might be in our database. Let's run it. It comes back as a perfect match for no one. So at this point, they're like, you know what? Maybe we should broaden the spectrum just a little bit. They run the DNA again, this time not looking for a perfect match, but a match close enough where the person was like a close family member, at least, of the guy that they're looking for. Now, at first, this is a bust as well. It doesn't turn up any results, but they are lucky when in 2008, the next year, a man by the name of Christopher is brought in and booked on weapons charges. His DNA sample flagged them as being a match for their guy. But they knew at his age he couldn't possibly be the Grim Sleeper. He was just too young to be out here running amok in the 80s. He wasn't old enough. The DNA was so close though that it had to be like his father. So that brings their attention to his dad, Mr. Lonnie Franklin Jr. Even still with this new lead though, they were not that pressed to find him, honestly. 2 years go by and they're somewhat keeping an eye on Lonnie, somewhat kind of not even worried about it. But finally, 2 years later, they are watching Lonnie. They're on a stakeout. Lonnie is having pizza down to the local pizzeria. They're watching him. And he's one of those girls who do not eat the crust. I don't know who raised y'all like that, but you're supposed to eat the crust when it's good. And I don't understand people who don't, but that's a whole different video. You know what? Them folks probably can't be trusted. He was one of them people. As soon as he finishes his food, he places his little used napkin in his cup and his plate in the trash along with that crust. And as soon as he gets out of there, the investigators go in retrieving these items from the trash can, and they extract his saliva and DNA from the cup and from the pizza crust. It comes back as a match, and they confirm definitively without a shadow of a doubt that he is the Grim Sleeper. He is their guy for sure. This of course is more than enough to get them an arrest warrant and also a search warrant for his residence. When they conduct the search, over 1,000 Polaroid pictures are recovered of different women. Some of them were multiple pictures of the same woman, but that's a lot. And that ain't even it. There were also hundreds of hours of videotapes that he had taken of these women. The images in the videos found within his house were of Black women within a wide age range. There were teens, there were middle-aged women, there were older women, like just pretty much of all ages. The women were often nude in a lot of the images, and they were both conscious and unconscious, and some of the footage dated back 30 years. Police had such a difficult time identifying these women that they had to release a lot of the images to the public. Of course, they couldn't release like the really graphic ones, but they did pick out 180 that were somewhat presentable, and they showed them to the public and asked for their help identifying the women. If they knew who these women were at all, to contact them. They swore up and down that they tried to do it on their own long and hard, but meanwhile, Lil Lonnie is hit with 10 counts of murder. The victim number, the total count, is far greater than 10, like obviously from the pictures, but there were only 10 that they had solid evidence on. And so they decided to move forward with those 10. That's obviously enough to get you up out of these streets. Following his arrest, his lawyers argued that the DNA obtained through the pizza crust, it should not be admitted into court. It should not be permissible because it constituted an illegal search, and that should not be allowed. They were not successful in having it thrown out, but I guess they figured it was worth a shot, and it did not work. Now, they do also try to charge him in the case where the man was found in the street, but there was no evidence really tying him to that at all. It was so different than his typical MO, so they were not able to get that one to stick. But the other 10 for the women, it was the one teenager princess and 9 of the other women that were successful in getting a guilty verdict on those. His sentencing is held on August 10th of 2016. And at the time of his sentencing, the prosecution presented 6 more cases that they have confirmed, like they're 100% sure. They have evidence of he's guilty for sure. He did this. And they didn't find this evidence until way after the fact. They had the option to still add it though, but this would have potentially pushed out his sentencing and final decision on his trial. And so they didn't want to risk it. They were like, you know what, we already got enough. We didn't spend enough time here, but we want to let you know that we know that this was all you. They'd actually found a couple of IDs and other personal belongings that belonged to 2 women that had been reported missing and had physically never been found, never seen again inside of his garage. So they knew that he was responsible. Even without these additional 6 victims added to the roster, he receives a death sentence. Almost 30 years he spent out here in these streets. He was 61 when he was apprehended, and then 2 weeks shy of his 64th birthday when he got his little brand new set of prison wings. Happy birthday. After his little sentencing, he is hauled on down to his little holding cell where he's going to wait on that good old faithful day. And 3 years into his sentence, in 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom gets his ass up there and says that he is halting all executions for as long as he is governor. As long as he is in office, none of them will go down, which actually affected over 700 inmates at the time. Trifling little Lonnie, he rejoices in the fact that he had seemingly evaded fatal punishment for his actions. But my good sis Fate said, not so fast, my girl. Within a year, he is found inside of his cell unresponsive. Now, we don't know if nature decided to get their girl up out of here or if somebody just snuck in the cell and snuffed him on the low, and that was it. Whatever the case, on March 29th of last year, 2020, if you in the future you need some clarification there, that was his last day with us. As for the aftermath, his wife Sylvia, she had been, of course, on and off with him throughout the years, and eventually she ended up leaving him. So nobody really gave her any slack. She didn't know anything that was going on. She was a nice little school teacher who went to church all the time, and she didn't want nothing to do with any of the things. Now they say she will go off on you if you try to approach her with this mess. So tread lightly if you see her in the streets. But for the most part, when the news hit, like the neighborhood, they didn't really give her a hard time. It was just like reporters randomly coming through, things like that, like those type of people bothering her. She still lives in the same neighborhood and she is completely unbothered. You know what's so crazy? This case has a lot of similarities to the Anthony Sowell case. If you are familiar with him and you don't know, I've already done a video on it. I'll put it in the iCards if I remember, and it'll pop up if I remember. The 2 men were very similar. What's crazy is that a year after Lonnie commits his final crime, Anthony emerges from the trenches of Ohio and he starts doing the same shit. Like, it's like he passed the torch. It reminds me of that moment on Child's Play where Charles Lee Ray, his soul is leaving his body and he jumps into the good guy doll and carries on the madness. Yeah, but I guess this is way worse. They're both very disgusting human beings, honestly. And this is pretty much it for Lonnie's story. And also this video. Please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up on your way out. Since I done the hard part. I did all the work putting it together, doing all the research, filming, editing, all of the things. All you gotta do is go like, and it really helps me out a lot. Y'all just don't know how much that really does help. Share the video with a friend. Thank you again, y'all, for over 100K. We are like 101K. That's real cute. Don't forget, anybody, claim this prize. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending time with me, and I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday. Peace. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. In an order, what? And Ronald, why do I want to call him Ronald so bad? Lonnie was some L's back to back like that. They get me every time. I feel like an Easter egg. The LAP, the what? That was a lot of the cases. Richard Romero. Who was Richard Romero? Is that an actor? Not him, if it is. San Francisco and Upper, what else? Was he in Beverly Hills? Because they just felt like it was blah, blah, blah. What they feel like, bro? Spreading awareness and making the people aware, which is the same thing as spreading awareness. Oh my God. So they had quite a bit of reach. Oh no. So does my eyelash glue. Son of a bitch. The details of the crime scene were very, I was gonna say sinister. They were that, but that ain't what I'm trying to say. Putting themselves in dangerous what? Type of people for the Merce. Ugh. 30 shit. Right in the center of a mid. I was about to say he had been left right in the center of a midsection. No. He had been left right in the center of a midsection. I was about to say it again. What am I even trying to say? I'm really not liking this under eye orange at all. So let me just try to finesse. Try to look like I got a black eye. Now, this particular case is a very pivotal. What does pivotal mean? Exactly. As soon as she realized she had been shot, sis passes out, blacks out completely. Some shit I do. I've been shot? Like, girl, yes, you're bleeding. Now, I did hear that oftentimes when you get shot, you don't hear the one that hits you. And I know a couple of people that's been shot, but I ain't never asked them. I wonder if it's true. If you've been shot, let me know in the comments. No, that's probably not okay to ask, y'all. That's probably very triggering for you. When Anastasia regains, girl. Y'all, we got some small, cute little ducks in the neighborhood. They're new, and I hope they are not like those other fucking birds. I'll let you know. So I'm targeting a 36-year-old. Y'all have been asking me for the details about this hair, and I will for sure put it in the description box today. It's down there today. And it's like a cross match between all the scenes. If that makes sense. Does that fucking make sense? I need to say that over. Similar matches like familial. Is the word familiar? Familial. Lonnie Franklin Jr. That's his name, right? Yeah, I think it's Lonnie David Franklin. Child. Following his arrest, his sentencing is held on August 10th in 2006. No, it was 2016.